turn it over to a new subject, and something that really got a lot of folks talking here. What was it, about a week ago, I guess, a week and a half ago, we started talking about a subject of Baldwin County Public Schools and a vote coming up dealing with money to fund those. So we figured a great time to bring Dr. Alan Lee into the studio from Baldwin County Public Schools. Good morning.
Good morning, Wayne, Sean. Good morning.
Good to have you in here and to answer a bunch of questions because, gosh, we went through an hour of questions and comments about what's going on. First of all, I want you to just kind of give us your story, how your career that brings you here to Baldwin County as superintendent.
Well, I've actually been in the business for about 42 years.
Wow.
I've worked in Washington State, Idaho, Wyoming, Virginia, and now Alabama.
So you got tired of the cold?
Got tired of the cold, but actually it's been an adventure for me, meeting new people and learning how different systems operate. And actually came to Alabama because I'd heard about this incredible community that had passed the 1 cent sales tax to support their schools in one of the toughest economic times since the Great Depression. And that said to me that people in this county appreciate education and value what it does for communities and for children. And I wanted to be a part of that.
And compare that against other places, the backdrop of places you've worked, whether it be the Northwest or Virginia or something. I mean, is it different? Is it unique?
It is quite different. I actually worked in one school system where it was a railroad, forestry, prison, and mining town. And the attitude about education was that it was someplace the kids had to be until they were old enough to quit school and go out and get a job in the oil fields,
right,
or get a job on the railroad or wherever that might be. But in Baldwin County, people recognize that a good education is a step to the future for their children.
And Baldwin County has had a pretty good track record of providing, above average education in public schools. So you come into that, you see this vote for this 1 cent sales tax increase to fund schools. You say, okay, that's right for me. You come to Alabama. Now, when you opened up your notebook, opened up your binder day one, Dr. Lee, I mean, what did you see?
Well, what I saw was I learned the first week I was here from Dr. Craig Pouncey, a state assistant superintendent for instruction, that we only had a fund balance of $750,000. That was the first week I was on the job. And with a $260 million budget, I thought, what have I gotten myself into?
Wow.
And so the challenge became, how do we manage the monies? How do we make sure that we have the funds available should we have an emergency? And $750,000 doesn't go far. So we've been able to increase the fund balance. The state requires us to have $16.5 million on hand, and we've increased that fund balance to almost $24 million. Now, that doesn't belie the fact that we still need revenues, because that money sits there because we've managed the current 1 cent tax in a way that hasn't been frivolous or expending things that we didn't need.
Okay, so when voters passed that 1 cent tax, and I remember it wasn't I mean, some people were out there saying, you have to do this as a stopgap measure. This is a temporary thing to solve a problem we're having right now with a recession and this and that. So when it comes back up, people question, have things changed? Will we ever move away from that? Or is this the new status quo, that this is what it takes to fully fund Baldwin County Public Schools?
Well, let me just say this, that if you remember the sequence of events, the current 1 cent tax was approved in March, and in April there was an oil spill.
Mm-hmm.
And that oil spill, along with the decline in the economy, had really serious impact on tax revenues, both sales tax revenues and ad valorem, or property tax revenues. And we're still seeing a result of that. Ad valorem tax revenues are still declining. But if you want to get into whether or not we need it, I would tell you that the Baldwin County schools, under the statistics most recently released by the Department of Education, show that our annual cost per student is $560 less than the average annual cost per student in the state of Alabama.
Wow.
That means we're operating with about $43 million less than if we were at the average level. And I'm proud of that in one sense, because we're doing a good job with limited resources. However, if we're going to have schools for the future, schools that prepare young people to go out into a worldwide economy, we've got to be offering them things that we aren't offering today. Electives, technology, foreign language, and other courses that provide a more broad and rich education for them.
Dr. Lee, the scenario that was presented to the public, here's what will happen if we don't go forward with this tax that's in place right now, was frightening. And a lot of folks said, well, I think they're just trying to scare us. How do you respond to that?
Well, I've never had to sit down and try to find $28 million of cuts in any budget that I've ever worked with before, and it was disconcerting to me.
Well, that's two of us.
Yeah, it was disconcerting to me because as I looked at the things we were going to have to cut, I realized that the decisions I was making was not educationally sound. The decisions I was making was not for the betterment of children. It was simply an economic decision. And when I get to the bottom of that list, I've still got another $5 million in cuts that I have to find. People have suggested it is scare tactics, but I think I'd be held accountable if I didn't let people know what the results would be if we don't pass this tax.
We were presented with things like schools closing, athletics, maybe no more athletics, maybe no more band at some of the schools or all the schools in Baldwin County. That's wild stuff.
It is wild stuff, but one of the challenges that I have in trying to find that much money to cut causes me to look at such things as, I'll give you, for instance, bus mechanics. We're required to have one bus mechanic for every 25 buses. And I'm suggesting we cut bus mechanics by 50%, which would go against the regulations of the state. And for me to cut something that I'm required to have and yet allow something that's discretionary would be serious. And I can't answer any charge that would come from that.
Okay, and we're talking with Baldwin County Schools Superintendent Alan Lee in studio. Is there a list? Is there a list, a triage list? You know, like we would have in business, we would look at things and we would, obviously there are core things you have to do in a business to keep the lights on, keep the sound coming out of the speakers in the radio business, and there's ancillary things we cut back. Does that list exist for schools? I mean, that you go, okay, this is the absolute core we have to do, and all the things marked with a red X or whatever you would do would be the things that could be cut?
You can look at the list that's been published, and it's on investinprogress.com, and many of the local media also are publishing that list. Everything on that list is a core list. Those are things that we have to have.
As per the state of Alabama?
No. As per providing a good education.
Okay.
People have said to me, you need to tighten your belt, and they've suggested that we don't need nurses in our schools, that we don't need to be transporting kids, we don't need to be feeding breakfast. I mean, that's ludicrous in this day and age when we have children who get up every morning, have no one to see if their hair's combed, to see if, in fact, they're dressed properly, let alone fix some breakfast. It's ludicrous to suggest that children who are medically challenged, who would not be able to attend school in a safe way, would come to schools where we're not prepared to take care of them.
Okay, so these are some of the cores as per Dr. Lee.
That's correct.
All right, come back from the break. Go to break. More with Superintendent of Baldwin County Public Schools, Alan Lee. And we'll get your questions. You want to send an email in, you can do that as well. Sean at fmtalk1065.com. Got a question? We'll pick up the conversation here in about 3 minutes on FM Talk 1065. It's 8:45.